You are nothing but a homeless woman, a nobody. Harper's words echoed through every corner of the living room like the crack of a whip. My daughter-in-law, the family's golden girl, stood at the head of the dining table, holding my gaze with those venom-filled eyes I knew so well. The entire family watched in silence, expectant, as if they were about to witness a show. And it was. A show she had orchestrated with surgical precision. She had hired a private investigator, paid with money that likely came out of my own pocket originally, all to expose my financial life in front of everyone. All because I had stopped giving them cash. My son, Liam, sat beside her, wearing that sneer of disdain I hadn't seen in months, waiting to see me destroyed, humiliated, reduced to nothing. Harper lifted the manila envelope containing the investigator's report as if it were a trophy. In exactly 30 minutes, she said with a triumphant voice, everyone is going to know the truth about Eleanor. But what none of them knew, what they couldn't even imagine, was that the very report she had commissioned to destroy me was going to be the one that buried them. 30 minutes. That was all I needed to watch their entire world crumble. But I have to take you back. I have to show you how we got to that moment. Because revenge, true revenge, isn't built in 30 minutes. It is built on years of silence, tears, and reconstruction. My story began 8 years earlier, during the worst winter of my life, when I was 61 years old and my own son slammed the door in my face. Harper had entered our lives like a storm disguised as a gentle breeze. When Liam introduced me to her, she was 28, with a practiced smile and a way of tilting her head that made everyone think she was shy. But I saw her. I saw the way her eyes calculated everything. The size of my house, the make of my car, the jewelry I was wearing. From the first handshake, I knew she considered me an obstacle between her and what she believed belonged to her. At first, it was subtle. Small comments during family dinners. "Oh, Eleanor, that blouse is a little outdated, isn't it?" Or, "Oh, your house is so cute, even if it is a bit dark for my taste." Liam laughed. He always laughed. My son, who had once told me I was the strongest woman he knew, was now laughing at me right along with her. But I endured it. I smiled. I swallowed the poison because I thought a mother's love was unconditional, that eventually things would improve. After the wedding, everything got worse. Harper convinced Liam that they needed a bigger house, a new car, imported furniture. And every time they needed money, they appeared at my door. "Mom, it's just a loan. We'll pay you back next month." They never paid it back. Not a single dollar. I gave them $40,000 over 2 years. They drained the savings from 30 years of work. And when I finally told them I couldn't give them any more, when I explained that I needed that money for my retirement, Harper exploded. I remember that afternoon perfectly. It was February in Chicago. The wind chill cut right through the skin. I had gone to their house to bring them a casserole I had made. I knocked on the door, and Harper opened it with a glass of wine in her hand. She didn't even let me in. "You are no longer welcome here," she told me, with a calmness that was more terrifying than any scream. "Liam and I have been talking, and we think you are a toxic influence on our lives. Always complaining, always asking for attention. We don't need you anymore." I tried to speak to Liam. I called him over Harper's shoulder. He was sitting on the sofa, that gray sofa I had helped pay for, watching television as if I didn't exist. "Liam," I pleaded, "I'm your mother." He didn't even turn around. Harper closed the door. The slam resonated in my chest like a gunshot. I stood on that porch for I don't know how long, feeling the cold seep through my coat, watching my breath turn to steam. My legs were shaking, but I don't know if it was from the cold or the absolute devastation I felt. What came next was worse, much worse, because they hadn't just closed the door to their house. They had closed the door to the entire family. Harper was charming, charismatic. She knew how to manipulate people. In a matter of weeks, the whole family believed her version, that I was controlling, that I harassed them, that I asked them for money constantly when the truth was exactly the opposite. My cousin Susan, with whom I had grown up, stopped answering my calls. Family gatherings happened without me. Birthdays, Thanksgiving, everything. I had disappeared from their lives as if I had never existed. And then came the final blow. 3 months after that door slammed, I received a letter from a lawyer. Liam and Harper were suing me for harassment and defamation. They said I was spreading lies about them, that I showed up at their house uninvited, that I stalked them. All lies. But they had witnesses. Harper's family, some cousins she had convinced. The case didn't prosper legally, but the damage was done. My reputation was destroyed. I lost my house. I couldn't pay the mortgage without my savings. I lost friendships that had listened to the rumors. And one night in October, when I was 62 years old, I found myself sleeping in my car, an old sedan that smelled of dampness and defeat. I parked on different streets every night so no one would recognize me. I ate the bare minimum. I cried in silence so the people walking by wouldn't hear me. I had hit rock bottom in a way I never imagined possible. But in that dark bottom, in that place where nothing remains except your will to survive, something inside me ignited. A cold rage, a steely determination. I wasn't going to die like this. I wasn't going to let them win. I was going to get up, not to beg them to accept me again, but to show them who I really was. And when I did, when I was standing tall again, they were going to regret every word, every humiliation, every slammed door. I didn't know it then, but that moment in my car, with the fogged-up windows and an empty stomach, was the beginning of the greatest transformation of my life. And it was also the beginning of the end for them. The first night in my car, I thought I wouldn't survive. The cold filtered through every crack. My bones creaked every time I tried to get comfortable in the back seat, and fear was a constant presence tightening my chest. But I woke up, and the next day I woke up again, and again, until being alive stopped surprising me. Survival became a routine, and routine became something resembling strength. During the first few weeks, I lived off scraps. There was a diner 3 blocks from where I parked that put out the previous day's food every morning. I waited hidden until the employee went back inside and checked the bags. Stale bread, half-eaten salads, sometimes a piece of chicken. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me standing. I washed up in the public restrooms of a library, using the cheap soap from the dispensers and drying myself with the rough paper towels that left my skin red. Every morning I looked at myself in that stained mirror and forced myself to hold my own gaze. You are not going to give up, I told myself. They don't win. I needed money. Anything. I looked for work for weeks, but at 62 years old and with no fixed address, no one would hire me. The interviews were humiliating. I watched as the recruiters looked at my application and then looked at me, calculating my age, seeing my wrinkled clothes, deciding I wasn't worth it. One of them didn't even pretend. Ma'am, we need young people, with energy. As if my 30 years of experience meant nothing. It was then that I saw a woman selling sandwiches on a corner downtown. She was about my age, had a makeshift cart, and a line of 5 people waiting. I watched her for an hour. I calculated how much she charged, how many she sold, how much she might be earning. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night I counted the money I had left. $120. It was everything I had in the world. I could keep it and wait to starve to death in a month, or I could bet it all on an opportunity. I bought bread, high-quality deli meats, fresh lettuce, spices. I used the kitchen of a community shelter I had started going to for showers. I told them I was making food to sell, and one of the workers, a woman named Imani with kind eyes, let me use the space for 2 hours every morning before dawn. We all need help sometimes, she told me. Those were the first kind words I had heard in months, and they almost made me cry right there. My first sandwiches were a disaster. Too soggy, or the ratios were off. But I kept trying. I adjusted the ingredients, the wrapping, the presentation. In a week, I had perfected the recipe. They were fresh, substantial, with a flavor that tasted like home. I set up my first spot on a busy corner, with nothing more than a cardboard box lined with aluminum foil and a thermal bag I found in the trash. I sold 6 sandwiches the first day, $9 in profit. I wept when I counted that money. $9 that no one had given me, that no one had loaned me. $9 that were completely mine. The next day I sold 10, then 15, then 20. In a month, I was earning almost $100 a day. I wasn't rich, but it was enough to eat, to put gas in the car, to start saving again. The customers started to recognize me. They called me the sandwich lady. Some asked about my story, and I smiled vaguely, without giving details. Others simply bought and left. But they came back the next day, and that was all I needed. There was a gentleman, a man in a suit who passed by every morning on his way to his office, who always bought 3 sandwiches and gave me a $2 tip. "Keep going," he would tell me. He didn't know how much those words meant. After 3 months selling on the street, I had saved $1,200. I was still sleeping in my car, but now I had a clear goal. One day, that same man in the suit stopped longer than usual. "You have a talent for this," he told me. "Have you thought about expanding?" I told him I didn't have the resources. He took a card out of his wallet. "I work at a real estate agency. We always need people for catering services at our open houses. Small things, coffee, finger foods, nothing fancy, but it pays well. Call me if you're interested." That card changed my life. His name was Gregory. He was a partner at a mid-sized agency on the west side of the city. I called him that same night from a payphone, my hands shaking so much I could barely dial. He gave me a chance. A small open house, 50 people. He wanted sandwiches and coffee. He would pay me $200. I accepted immediately. I prepared 120 mini sandwiches in the shelter kitchen, working from 3 in the morning until 8. Imani helped me pack them on makeshift trays. "You're going to make it," she said. And there was so much faith in her voice that I almost believed her. I arrived at the open house an hour early, wearing my best clothes, which I had washed 3 times so they wouldn't smell like a car. I set everything up with trembling hands. I arranged the sandwiches on borrowed platters. I brewed the coffee in a machine Gregory had let me use. The food disappeared in half an hour. People stood in line. They asked for my business card. I didn't have one, so I wrote my phone number on napkins, feeling a mix of shame and pride. Gregory approached me at the end of the event with a huge smile. "Eleanor, it was a hit. I have 3 other open houses this month. Are you available?" I said yes before he finished the question. Those jobs turned into more jobs. Gregory recommended me to other agents. I started doing catering for offices, small parties, business meetings. In 6 months, I had saved $5,000. I was still sleeping in my car, but now it was a strategic choice, not a sentence. Every dollar I didn't spend on rent was a dollar that brought my next step closer. And that step came one afternoon when Gregory invited me for coffee. "Eleanor, I've been watching you. You have a work ethic, you have talent, and you have something most people don't have, a hunger to succeed. I'm looking for someone to handle the administrative side of the agency. Nothing glamorous. Organizing appointments, handling documents, coordinating with clients. But it's a fixed salary, $1,000 a month, and you can do it while you keep up with your catering." I didn't think twice. I accepted. From selling sandwiches on the street to an employee at a real estate agency, it wasn't a miracle. It was work, sweat, and the absolute refusal to stay on the ground. But the most important thing was that no one, absolutely no one in my family, knew what I was doing. To them, I had disappeared. A homeless woman, a nobody. And while they went on with their lives, laughing at me at their family dinners, I was building something they couldn't even imagine. Working at Gregory's agency was like learning a completely new language. During the first few months, I made mistakes that made me want to disappear. I confused legal terms. I filed documents in the wrong places. Sometimes I didn't even understand what the agents were talking about when they discussed appraisals or mortgages, but I observed. I listened to every conversation as if my life depended on it. I took notes in a cheap notebook I kept in my purse, and at night, sitting in my car under the dim light of a street lamp, I studied everything I had written down during the day. Gregory noticed my dedication. One afternoon, he called me into his office and closed the door behind me. I thought he was going to fire me. Instead, he slid a thick book across his desk. Fundamentals of Real Estate read the cover. "If you're going to work here, you must understand the business," he told me. "Not just filing papers. Understand it for real." That night I started reading. I didn't understand half of it, but I kept reading. I looked up terms at the public library. I asked discreet questions to the agents. I watched educational videos on the computers at the community center. In 3 months, I had finished the book and started another one. My salary of $1,000 a month, plus the profits from the catering I kept doing on weekends, finally allowed me to rent a room. It wasn't much. Just a room with a twin bed and a shared bathroom in an old house on the south side of the city. But it had a roof. It had a door I could lock. It had a place where I could shower without rushing, where I could cook without asking anyone for permission. The first night I slept in a real bed, I cried so much I had to bite the pillow so I wouldn't wake the other tenants. They were tears of relief, of accumulated exhaustion, of a happiness so deep it hurt. But I didn't stop there. I couldn't. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harper's face closing the door on me. I saw Liam's smile watching television while I begged him. Those images were pure gasoline in my veins. I got up at 5 in the morning, worked at the agency until 6 in the evening, then prepared food for events until midnight. On weekends, I took free administration and sales courses at the community college. I slept 4 hours a day. My body protested. My joints ached. Sometimes I got dizzy from fatigue. But it didn't matter. I was 63 years old, and I was building a future they had told me I no longer deserved. After a year at the agency, Gregory promoted me to sales coordinator. My salary went up to $2,000 a month. But the most important thing was that I started to understand how the real estate business really worked. I learned to read the market, to identify properties with potential, to calculate profitability. I saw how the agents made deals and mentally took notes on their strategies. Some were aggressive, others subtle, but the best ones were those who listened, those who understood that selling a house wasn't just showing walls and windows, but selling a future, a possibility, a dream. One day, an older couple came to the agency looking to sell their house. They wanted to move to a smaller apartment, but they didn't understand the process. The agent assigned to them was young, impatient, spoke too fast, and used terms that confused them. I watched from my desk as the couple became increasingly uncomfortable. When the agent stepped out to take a call, I approached them. I offered them coffee. I explained the process step by step with simple words, without rushing. I showed them sample documents, translated the legal jargon into human language. When the agent returned, the couple was thanking me with tears in their eyes. Gregory witnessed the whole scene. That afternoon he told me something I will never forget. Eleanor, you don't just understand the business, you understand people. And in this job, that is worth more than any college degree. 2 weeks later, he offered to train me to get my real estate license. I'll pay for the course, he said. When you pass, you'll work with me as a junior partner, 60-40 split on commissions. In my favor for the first 2 years, then we renegotiate. I studied for that exam as if my life depended on it. Because it did. I took the 6-week intensive course. I studied every night until the letters became blurry. I practiced with mock exams until I could do them with my eyes closed. I was 64 years old and the oldest person in the class by 20 years. Some classmates looked at me with pity, as if wondering what a lady my age was doing trying to start a new career. I let them look. When the results came, I had obtained the highest score in my group. My first sale as an agent was a small house in a quiet neighborhood. The commission was $3,000. $3,000 for 2 weeks of work. More than I earned in 3 months selling sandwiches. I sat in my car after closing the deal and simply stared at the check for 20 minutes. It wasn't a huge amount for many, but for me, it represented something much bigger than money. It was proof that I could do it, that I wasn't finished, that at 64 years old, I could completely reinvent myself. The sales kept coming. I had something the young agents didn't have: patience, empathy, life experience. I knew how to talk to young couples looking for their first home because I remembered what that dream was like. I knew how to talk to older people selling the house where they raised their children because I understood that pain. And I knew how to talk to people in crisis, losing their homes, facing divorces or bankruptcies, because I had been at that dark bottom and had climbed out. In 2 years, I became one of the best agents in the office. Gregory kept his word, and we renegotiated our agreement. Now it was 50-50. My annual income exceeded $60,000. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in a decent building. I bought new clothes, not designer, but clean and professional. I ate 3 times a day. I had health insurance. Things most people take for granted, but for me, they were everyday miracles. But my mind was already further ahead. I saw how the business worked from the inside and understood that the real winners weren't the agents, But the owners, the developers, the investors who bought properties, renovated them, and sold them for a profit. I started studying that world too. I attended free seminars on real estate investment, read books on creative financing, learned about loans and investment partnerships. There was a property I had seen for months. An old house in a neighborhood that was starting to improve, listed for $50,000. It needed work, but it had potential. I calculated that with $20,000 in renovations, I could sell it for $90,000, a profit of $20,000. The problem was that I only had $15,000 saved. I proposed the idea to Gregory. You put up $35,000, I put up $15,000. We split the profit 70-30, in your favor. He looked at me as if I had lost my mind. Then he smiled. All right, but you manage the whole project. I only put up the money. I bought that house and spent the next 4 months supervising every detail of the renovation. I hired workers I knew from the neighborhood, negotiated material prices, was present at every phase of construction. I learned about plumbing, electricity, painting, flooring. Sometimes I worked myself, sanding walls, painting window frames. I was 66 years old, and my knees protested every time I climbed a ladder, but I didn't care. This was my trial by fire. We sold the house for $95,000. After expenses, the net profit was $22,000. My share was $6,600. But more important than the money was what I learned: that I could do it alone, that I didn't need to depend on anyone, that I had the knowledge, the vision, and the courage to build something of my own. Gregory saw it too. Eleanor, he told me after closing the sale, you don't need to work for me anymore. You need to work for yourself. He was right. And although I was scared, although the idea of leaving the security of a fixed salary terrified me, I knew the time had come. At 67, I registered my own company, Eleanor Development and Consulting. I didn't have a fancy office, just a table in my apartment and a cell phone. But I had something much more valuable: experience, contacts, reputation, and a determination that had been forged on the streets, in the cold of my car, in every humiliation I had endured. And while my family still didn't know if I was alive or dead, I was building an empire. My company started as nothing more than a registered name and a bank account with $23,000 saved. I worked from my apartment with a used laptop I had bought for $200 and a printer that jammed every 3 pages. But I had something many new entrepreneurs don't have: years of real experience, solid contacts in the industry, and zero fear of hard work. At 67, when most people are thinking about retiring, I was building my first real business. The first few months were brutal. I did everything myself: looked for properties, negotiated with sellers, coordinated inspections, handled legal paperwork, supervised renovations, photographed houses, created ads, showed properties, closed sales. I worked 18 hours a day. My only expenses were basic food and work materials. I didn't go to restaurants, I didn't buy new clothes, I didn't have cable or internet at home, I used Wi-Fi at coffee shops. Every dollar was reinvested in the business. My first property as an independent businesswoman was a 2-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood. I bought it for $42,000 with my savings and a small bank loan that almost got rejected because of my age. Ma'am, at your age, this kind of risk, the loan officer started to say. I interrupted him by showing him my sales history from the last 3 years, my certifications, my references. They gave me the loan, but with a higher interest rate than normal. It didn't matter. It was my chance. I renovated that house in 2 months. I hired Caleb, a carpenter I had worked with before, honest and fast. I paid him well, but I demanded quality. I changed floors, modernized the kitchen with economical but elegant materials. I painted everything in neutral colors that made the spaces look larger. I installed new lighting that made every corner shine. When we finished, that modest house looked like it was taken from a magazine. I sold it for $78,000 in 3 weeks. After paying the loan, renovation costs, and taxes, I was left with $17,000 of pure profit. I took those $17,000 and turned them into 2 smaller properties. Then those 2 turned into 3. In a year, I had 6 simultaneous projects in different stages. I hired Caleb full-time and 2 other workers. I could no longer handle everything from my apartment, so I rented a small office in a commercial building. Just a single room with 2 desks and a shared bathroom, but it had a sign on the door, Eleanor Development. Every time I walked in and saw that sign, I felt something indescribable in my chest. My reputation started to grow in local real estate circles. It wasn't the biggest company or the flashiest, but it was known for something very valuable. It kept its word, delivered on time, and its renovations were quality. Agents started recommending me. Banks started seeing me as a reliable client. At 68, my company had annual revenues of almost $200,000. But I wanted more. Not out of greed, but because every dollar earned was one more proof that I was worth something, that I wasn't a homeless woman, that I wasn't a nobody. I started studying the urban development market, specifically affordable housing. I saw that the government was launching bids to build housing complexes for low-income families. Large projects, millions of dollars, usually dominated by huge companies with decades of experience. I was a one-person company with a 3-year history. I didn't have a chance, or so everyone thought. I spent 6 months preparing. I studied every requirement of the government bids. I took courses on public contracts, on building regulations, on financing large projects. I partnered with a young architect named Alonzo, who had the talent but not the resources to grow. I proposed we become partners on future projects. I put up the business knowledge and contacts. He put up the design and technical supervision. He accepted immediately. When the call came out for a social housing project, 50 residential units on the east side of the city, I submitted my proposal. I was competing against 8 companies, all bigger than mine. My advantage was that I knew that neighborhood. I had sold houses there for years. I knew the people. I understood their needs. My proposal wasn't the most expensive nor the most elaborate, but it was the most human. It included common areas, shared gardens, spaces for children, designed by someone who understood what it meant not to have a home, because I myself had slept in a car. The wait was agonizing. 3 months without hearing anything. I kept working on my regular projects, but my mind was on that bid. If I won, it would be a huge leap. If I lost, well, I would keep doing what I was doing. But when the email arrived from the government office, my hands shook so much I could barely open the message. Dear Miss Eleanor, we are pleased to inform you that your proposal has been selected. I read that line 5 times before believing it. I had won. Me, a 68-year-old woman who 5 years ago was living in her car, had just won a government contract for $3 million. I sat in my empty office, because it was already late and everyone had left, and I cried, not from sadness, but from a satisfaction so deep I didn't have words to describe it. I called Imani, the woman from the shelter who had helped me years ago. We still kept in touch. She was one of the few people who knew my full story. You did it, she said with a cracking voice. I knew you would. The project took 18 months. They were the most intense 18 months of my life. I coordinated with contractors, supervised construction, negotiated with suppliers, managed million-dollar budgets, solved daily problems. There were moments of absolute panic, like when a supplier went bankrupt and I had to find a replacement in 48 hours, or when an inspection revealed foundation issues that set us back 3 weeks. But every problem was solved. Every crisis was overcome. When we delivered the project, 3 weeks ahead of schedule, the 50 families who moved into those houses threw a celebration. They invited me. I saw children running through the gardens I had designed, saw mothers crying with happiness in the new kitchens, saw grandparents sitting on porches watching the sunset. A lady approached me. She was about my age and she hugged me. Thank you for giving us a home, she told me. In that moment, I understood that what I was building wasn't just a business, it was redemption. For them and for me. The government was so satisfied they offered me a second contract, bigger 80 residential units, then a third. My company grew to 20 employees. I opened real offices with a reception area and a conference room. My personal income exceeded $400,000 a year. I bought my own condo, not rented mine. 2 bedrooms, city view, in a building with security. I bought a new car, reliable, one that didn't smell of defeat. I had private health insurance, emergency savings, a retirement account that grew every month. At 69, I was a successful businesswoman, recognized in my industry, financially stable. But most importantly, I had done it completely alone, without help from my family, without inheritances or favors, just with work, intelligence, and an iron will forged in the darkest nights of my life. And during all that time, during those 7 years of rebuilding and climbing, my family knew absolutely nothing. To them, I was still a homeless woman who had disappeared. A sad story they probably told at family dinners to feel better about themselves. Poor Eleanor, she could never get over her failure. But then the email arrived, a strange message from an unknown address. Subject: information regarding your person. The body of the message was brief. Miss Eleanor, I have been hired to investigate your financial and personal situation. I request that we meet to discuss certain findings. Sincerely, Lucas Miller, private investigator. My blood ran cold. Someone was investigating me, and I had a very clear suspicion of who was behind it. Lucas Miller's email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing blueprints in my office. I read it 3 times trying to process what it meant. Someone had hired a private investigator to dig into my life. After 7 years of absolute silence, someone wanted to know what had become of me. And there was only one logical reason for that. They had discovered that I was no longer the destroyed woman they left behind. I didn't answer the email immediately. I needed to think. I hired my own investigation services, a discreet firm recommended by my lawyer. I gave them Lucas Miller's name and asked them to find out everything. 3 days later, I had a full report on my desk. Lucas was legitimate, with 15 years of experience, specializing in financial and background investigations. But the most revealing thing was the list of his recent clients. And there it was, like a slap in the face: Harper Morales, Miller. My daughter-in-law was investigating me. The question was, why now, after so much time? I asked my investigator to dig deeper. A week later, I received information that explained everything. Harper had been looking for me on social media. She had asked discreetly among acquaintances in the neighborhood where I used to live. Someone, probably an old neighbor, had mentioned that they had seen me driving a new car. That had been enough to spark her curiosity. Or rather, her greed. Because according to my investigator, Harper and Liam weren't exactly thriving. The company they had started with my money, a business consultancy that sounded impressive on paper but produced little, was barely staying afloat. They had debts, overdue loans, and their expensive lifestyle was drowning them. If I had recovered money somehow, Harper wanted to know. She probably planned some kind of lawsuit, or at least to try to extract more cash from me with threats or emotional manipulation. What she didn't know was that she wasn't investigating a broken and desperate woman. She was investigating someone with resources, connections, and absolutely no intention of being a victim again. I decided to let Lucas continue his investigation. I didn't answer his email. I wanted to see how far they would go, what exactly they would discover, and how they planned to use that information. My lawyer warned me it was risky, but I trusted that the truth was on my side. During the following weeks, I received more emails from Lucas, each one more insistent. Miss Eleanor, it is important that we speak. I have information concerning you. Your family is worried about you. That last line almost made me laugh. My family worried, the same family that kicked me out onto the street without looking back. I continued without answering, but I knew that eventually, Lucas would complete his report and hand it to Harper, and then things would get interesting. Meanwhile, I decided to do my own investigation on them. If they were going to dig into my life, I would do the same with theirs. I gave my investigator instructions to check everything: finances, businesses, taxes, anything he could find. Be exhaustive, I told him. I'm not interested in destroying them. I just want to know the whole truth. It was a lie. I absolutely was interested in having ammunition just in case I needed it. The report arrived 2 weeks later, and it was much worse than I imagined. Harper and Liam didn't just have normal financial problems, they had serious legal problems. Their company had received donations for a charity project that was never completed. The money, more than $50,000, had disappeared into personal expenses. There were fake invoices, manipulated receipts, a paper trail that clearly showed embezzlement of funds. Furthermore, they had undeclared offshore accounts, likely tax evasion. And most worrying, they were being discreetly investigated by the IRS. I sat in my office reading that report with a mixture of horror and satisfaction. Horror because that was my son, my own blood, involved in criminal activities. Satisfaction because now I fully understood who they really were. They weren't just selfish or manipulative people, they were literally criminals who had stolen money meant to help others. The money I had given them years ago, those $40,000 from my savings, had probably been the seed of all this. Then came the call that changed everything. It was Susan, my cousin, with whom I hadn't spoken for 7 years. Her voice sounded uncomfortable, artificial. "Eleanor, how long has it been? We've been thinking about you. The family wants to get together, you know, reconnect." I asked her directly why now, after so much time. There was a long pause. "Well, Liam mentioned that maybe things didn't end well between you two. We thought it would be good to patch things up." It was obvious. Harper had shared something of what Lucas had discovered. They knew I had money, and they wanted access. I gave them what they wanted. I agreed to go to a family dinner. "It will be at Liam and Harper's house," Susan said, with a tone that tried to sound casual but betrayed nervousness. "Saturday at 7. Does that work for you?" I said yes. Susan seemed surprised that I had accepted so easily. "Wonderful. See you then." I hung up and leaned back in my chair. I had exactly 2 weeks to prepare. I called my lawyer. I explained the whole situation. I showed him the report on Harper and Liam, told him about the private investigator, about the dinner invitation. "I want you to prepare certified copies of all this," I told him, "and I want you to be available that night in case I need legal backup." He looked at me with a mix of worry and admiration. "Eleanor, what are you planning?" I smiled at him. "I'm just going to a family dinner." But it wasn't just a dinner. It was a battlefield, and I was going completely armed. I discreetly contacted a federal agent I had met during one of my government projects. I casually mentioned that I had information about possible charity fraud and tax evasion. I passed him copies of the report. "Interesting," he said after reviewing it. "Very interesting. Let me investigate a little more, and I'll contact you." 3 days later, he called me. "Miss Eleanor, there is indeed an open investigation on these people. Your information is very valuable." I asked him if there would be any action in the near future. "Possibly," he replied. "We are in the evidence-gathering stage." "Why do you ask?" I told him about the dinner. There was silence. Then, "You know what? Give me the address and the date. We might have agents in the area that night. You never know when an opportunity to ask questions might arise." It wasn't a direct promise, but it was enough. The days leading up to the dinner were strange. I received more calls from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years, all with the same fake energy, the same sudden interest in my well-being. "How have you been, Eleanor? We've missed seeing you. It will be so nice to have you back." Each call confirmed to me that Harper had leaked information. She had probably told them that I had money, that maybe I could be useful to the family again. What none of them knew was how much money I really had, nor what I had achieved, and they definitely didn't know what I knew about them. The Thursday before the dinner, I received Lucas's final report. He didn't send it directly to me, but to Harper, yet my own investigator had intercepted a copy. It was exhaustive. It detailed my company, my projects, my properties, my income. Everything was there, documented with photos of my offices, copies of public records of my government contracts, even estimates of my net worth that were surprisingly accurate. $1,200,000. For someone like Harper, that amount was a fortune. For me, it was tangible proof that I had won. But Lucas was professional. His report didn't just include financial information. It included a final section titled Additional Findings. And in that section, he had put something she clearly didn't expect to find: information regarding the financial irregularities of his own clients. Lucas had discovered, in the course of his investigation on me, the red flags in Harper and Liam's finances. As an ethical investigator, he had included them in the report with a note: "Urgent legal consultation recommended regarding these matters." It was perfect. More than perfect. The same report Harper had commissioned to humiliate me publicly was going to expose them. And she didn't know it yet, because the full report was scheduled to be delivered on Saturday, the day of the dinner, at 7:30 in the evening. Exactly 30 minutes after I arrived, Lucas, unknowingly, had scheduled the perfect moment for my revenge. I spent Friday preparing. I bought myself an elegant cream-colored dress, not flashy but clearly expensive, comfortable but designer shoes, a simple necklace of real pearls. I wanted to look successful but not ostentatious, confident but not arrogant. I practiced my expression in the mirror, calm, serene, impenetrable. That night, I wasn't going as the broken woman they remembered. I was going as the woman I had become. Saturday dawned with a clear and cold sky. I got up at 6 in the morning, even though the dinner wasn't until 7 at night. I couldn't sleep well. Not from nerves, but from anticipation. It was like the night before a battle you knew you were going to win, but that still filled you with an electric energy impossible to control. I ate breakfast slowly. I checked my documents one last time. I confirmed with my lawyer that he would be available by phone all night. At 5 in the afternoon, I began to get ready. I showered calmly, letting the hot water relax every tense muscle. I dried my hair with care. I styled it in a simple but elegant way. I applied makeup softly, just enough to look rested and healthy. I put on the cream dress I had bought. I looked at myself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. It wasn't the 61-year-old woman who had slept in her car. It was a 69-year-old businesswoman who had built an empire from ashes. I arrived at Liam and Harper's house exactly at 7. It was a large house in an elegant residential neighborhood, probably too expensive for their actual income, which explained many of their debts. There were several cars parked outside. I recognized some. The whole family was there. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a presentation. A show staged specifically for me. I rang the doorbell. Harper opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She wore a tight black dress, flashy jewelry, too much makeup. She was trying to project success but only managed to look desperate. "Eleanor," she said in a sugary voice, "what a joy that you came. You've been lost for so long. We thought something terrible had happened to you." The implication was clear. They thought I was dead or destroyed or living in misery. They were going to love the surprise. I entered the house. The living room was full of people. Susan was there with her husband. Other cousins whose names I barely remembered. Some friends of Harper who had clearly been invited as an audience. Everyone looked at me with that mixture of curiosity and pity people reserve for problem relatives. Liam was standing by the fireplace, with a glass of wine in his hand, looking older than I remembered. Our gazes met. He smiled, but it was the smile of a predator who thinks he has his prey cornered. "Mom," he said, with a voice that tried to sound warm but sounded hollow. "How long has it been?" I didn't move to hug him. I just nodded. "Liam." There was a moment of awkward tension. Susan broke the silence by offering me a glass of wine. I accepted it, but I didn't drink. I needed to keep my mind completely clear. We sat down to dinner. The table was elaborately set, with expensive china and candles. Harper had cooked, or more likely had hired a catering service. The food was good, but I could barely taste it. My stomach was knotted with anticipation. The conversations were superficial at first. Generic questions about my health, where I lived, what I had been doing. I answered vaguely. "I'm fine. I've been working, keeping busy." I didn't offer details. I made them work for every crumb of information. I could see the frustration growing in Harper's eyes. She expected me to arrive grateful for being included again, maybe even begging forgiveness for whatever she had convinced everyone I had done wrong. Instead, I was calm, controlled, giving short answers that revealed nothing. It was a reversal of power that was clearly bothering her. After the main course, Harper finally decided to make her move. She stood up, tapped her glass with a knife to get everyone's attention. "I want to propose a toast," she said, with a voice attempting to sound cheerful but holding a sharp edge. "We are so happy to have Eleanor back with us after so long. We know the last few years have been difficult for her." Dramatic pause. Looks of feigned compassion from the guests. But family always forgives, always welcomes back those who have lost their way. I remained seated, looking at her without expression. She continued. "In fact, we have been so worried about Eleanor that we took the initiative to make sure she was okay. We wanted to know if she needed help, if she was in trouble." She pulled the manila envelope from under her chair, where she had clearly hidden it, waiting for this moment. We hired a professional to verify her situation. Just because we care, of course. The silence in the room was absolute. All eyes were on me, waiting for my reaction. Shame, anger, humiliation, anything. I gave them nothing. I just kept looking at Harper with the same serene expression. That seemed to annoy her even more. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers and pulled out the first pages of the report. According to this professional report, she read aloud, savoring every word. Eleanor has been living in... She stopped. Her eyes scanned the page quickly, her expression changing from triumphant to confused. It says here that she has a company. Nervous laughter from some guests. Liam leaned in to see the paper. A company? A real estate development company, Harper continued, her voice losing confidence. With government contracts. I continued saying nothing. I just took a sip of water and waited. Harper turned to the next page, then the next, reading faster, her face getting paler and paler. Properties, investments, a net worth of... She stopped completely. Liam snatched the report from her hands and read it himself. The expression on his face was almost comical. Shock, disbelief, and then something darker. $1,200,000, he said out loud, without thinking. Collective gasps around the table. Susan dropped her fork. Harper's friends looked at each other, not knowing what to do. The moment of humiliation that Harper had orchestrated so carefully had just exploded in her face. But I knew this was just the beginning. The real show was about to start. Harper tried to recover. Well, that's wonderful, Eleanor. Really wonderful. Her voice was high-pitched, fake. Although I have to ask, if you have so much money, why did you cut all contact with your family? Why did you stop helping us when clearly you can afford it? There it was, the real reason for this dinner. It wasn't reconciliation. It was access to my money. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Harper frowned. Who could that be at this hour? Liam went to open the door. I heard voices in the entryway. Then Liam returned with a man carrying a gray briefcase. Mrs. Harper Morales Miller? The man asked. Harper nodded, confused. I'm Lucas Miller. I have your full report. Sorry for the delay. There were some additional pages that needed extra verification. It was 7:30, exactly 30 minutes after my arrival. Perfect timing. Lucas handed her a second envelope, thicker than the first. This is the full and certified report, he said. I recommend you read it in private. There is sensitive information in the last pages. But Harper, still trying to maintain control of the situation, opened it right there. There are no secrets in this family, she said with a forced laugh. She began to read the additional pages. Her expression changed dramatically. It went from confusion to absolute shock and horror in a matter of seconds. Liam took the report from her hands and read it too. The color disappeared completely from his face. This can't be right, he stammered. Lucas cleared his throat. Everything is verified and documented, sir. Bank records, tax returns, email communications. It's public record information, mostly. Liam looked at Harper with panic. She stared at the paper, as if the words would change if she observed them long enough. Susan, unable to contain herself, reached out and took one of the pages that had fallen onto the table. She began to read aloud before Liam could stop her. Tax irregularities, undeclared offshore accounts, diverted charity funds, pending federal investigation. Her voice faded as she processed what she was reading. The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone at the table looked at Liam and Harper with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. This wasn't the show Harper had planned. She was going to expose me as a failure who needed charity. Instead, she had just exposed her own crimes in front of the entire family and a room full of witnesses. Harper tried to snatch the paper from Susan, but it was already too late. My cousin had read enough, and other guests were passing the sheets among themselves, reading fragments in low voices, sharing looks of disbelief. This is a lie, Harper screamed, her voice cracking. This investigator is wrong. Someone is defaming us. She pointed a trembling finger at me. This is your fault. You manipulated this somehow. I leaned back calmly in my chair and finally spoke. I didn't manipulate anything, Harper. You hired the investigator. You asked for a full report. He just did his job. My voice was calm, almost soft, but every word fell like a stone in still water. A good investigator doesn't just find what you want him to find. He finds the whole truth. Liam stood up abruptly, his chair falling backward with a loud bang. "All of you, get out. This is a private family conversation." But no one moved. The guests were too fascinated by the drama unfolding in front of them. Susan was still holding several pages of the report, reading them with widening eyes. Liam said slowly, "This says you took $53,000 from a charity fund for children with cancer. What did you use that money for?" "A vacation in Europe." "That's out of context," Liam tried to explain, sweat shining on his forehead. "Those were legitimate business expenses. We were looking for international partners to expand the charity project." But his voice lacked conviction. Even he knew it sounded absurd. Susan continued reading. "It also says you have 3 bank accounts in the Cayman Islands that you never declared to the IRS, that you moved more than $200,000 through those accounts in the last 4 years. Liam's phone began to ring. He ignored it. It kept ringing. Then Harper's phone also started to ring. She took it out with trembling hands, looked at the screen, and paled even more. "It's our lawyer," she whispered. Liam snatched the phone from her and answered, walking away toward the hallway. We could hear snippets of his conversation. "What do you mean they're here?" "No, wait, they can't do that without a warrant. Tomorrow morning, yes, we'll be there." He returned to the living room with an expression of pure terror. "We have to go," he told Harper. "Now." But before they could move, the doorbell rang again, this time insistent. 3 long rings. Liam froze. Harper started to cry. "Don't open it," she pleaded. "Please, don't open it." But one of the guests, confused by all the drama and clearly not understanding the gravity of the situation, went to the door and opened it. 2 men entered, both in dark suits, with badges hanging from their necks. "Internal Revenue Service," the credentials read. Behind them came a woman in a local police uniform. "Liam Miller and Harper Morales Miller?" asked one of the agents. His voice was professional, neutral, but with absolute authority. Liam nodded weakly. "We are from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We have a court order for the seizure of documents related to your company and a subpoena for you to appear tomorrow for formal questioning." Harper collapsed in her chair, sobbing openly now. Liam tried to maintain composure. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, his voice shaking. "Our lawyer can explain everything." One of the agents handed him an envelope. "This is the official subpoena. We are also here to collect any financial documents you have on the property. Computers, files, bank statements. You can cooperate voluntarily, or we can obtain a search warrant. Which do you prefer?" The guests began to stand up, uncomfortable, looking for exits. No one wanted to be present for what came next. Susan looked at me with an expression that mixed shock and something resembling respect. "Did you know?" she asked me in a low voice. I didn't answer directly. I just held her gaze until she looked away. Harper's friends were leaving quickly, murmuring excuses, leaving their plates half-eaten. In 5 minutes, the room was empty except for the immediate family and the federal agents. Liam looked at me with pure hatred I had never seen in his eyes before. "You did this," he accused. "You called these people. You set a trap for us." I stood up slowly, smoothed my dress, and picked up my purse. "I didn't do anything, Liam. You dug your own grave. I just stopped filling it with my money so you could survive a little longer." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned around. "By the way, that money you asked me for years ago, the $40,000 of my savings that you never paid back now, I understand what you really used it for. To start your little empire of fraud." Harper raised her head, her makeup smeared by tears, her expression a mixture of desperation and rage. "You are nothing but a homeless woman, a nobody," she spat the words with venom. "You always were. You always will be. A little dirty money doesn't change who you really are." There it was. The same words she had rehearsed saying to me publicly to humiliate me. But now, surrounded by federal agents and the total collapse of her life, they sounded hollow, pathetic. I approached her slowly. I leaned in until my face was inches from hers. When I spoke, my voice was barely a whisper, but every word was loaded with 7 years of pain, struggle, and eventual triumph. "You're right, Harper. I was homeless. I slept in my car for months thanks to you. I ate from the garbage. I washed in public restrooms. I hit rock bottom in ways you can't even imagine. I paused, letting the words sink in. But I got up. I built something real with my own hands. And you, with all your advantages, with all the money I gave you, with all the opportunities you had, what did you do? You stole from sick children. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. One of the agents coughed uncomfortably. I straightened up. I recovered my composure. My lawyers will be in touch, I told Liam. Not as a threat, but as a fact. Not about this. That is your problem with the government. But about the house I helped you buy, about the loans you never paid back, about all the little thefts you committed over the years thinking I was too stupid or too weak to do anything about it. Susan, who had remained silent during the entire exchange, finally spoke. Eleanor, I didn't know. None of us knew what really happened between you two. I looked at her, this cousin I had grown up with, who had abandoned me without even asking for my side of the story. No, you didn't know, because you didn't want to know. It was easier to believe her lies than to ask uncomfortable questions. My voice held no anger, just a statement of facts. But now you know, and you will have to live with that. I walked out of that house with my back straight and my head held high. Behind me, I could hear Harper sobbing, Liam arguing with the agents, the sound of drawers being opened as they began the search for documents. I got into my car, a new and reliable sedan that smelled of genuine leather, and sat in the silence for a moment. My hands shook slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear but from pure adrenaline. I had done it. I had gone to that dinner knowing exactly what was going to happen, and I had emerged victorious in a way I hadn't even fully imagined. I drove home slowly, processing everything. The expression on Liam's face when he read about my net worth. Harper's total collapse when her own crimes were exposed. The discomfort of the relatives who had been so willing to believe the worst of me without evidence. It was satisfying in a deep and complicated way. It wasn't happiness exactly, more like a sense of justice finally served, of accounts balanced after years of imbalance. When I arrived at my apartment, I took off the cream dress carefully, hanging it in the closet. I washed my face, put on comfortable clothes. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, looking at the city lights. My phone started ringing almost immediately. Susan, other cousins, even some of the guests who had been at the dinner. I ignored them all. I didn't owe them explanations. I didn't owe them comfort. I didn't owe them absolutely anything. There was only one call I did answer. It was Imani, my friend from the shelter who had helped me in my worst moments. I told her everything. She laughed, a genuine and warm sound. I knew this day would come, she told me. From the first day I saw you making sandwiches with that determination in your eyes, I knew you were going to succeed. We talked for an hour, not about revenge or justice, but about the path I had traveled, about the lessons learned, about the future that was still to be written. The days following the dinner were a whirlwind. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages from relatives who suddenly wanted to hear my side of the story. Calls from cousins swearing they had always believed in me, that they had never really been on Harper's side. Lies, all lies, but I let them go to voicemail without answering. I didn't need their validation now. I had stopped needing it years ago, in that cold car where I learned that the only person I could trust completely was myself. The news about Liam and Harper spread fast. In a community where everyone knew everyone, where gossip traveled faster than the wind, their fall was spectacular and public. Susan called me 3 days after the dinner. This time I answered. Her voice sounded small, ashamed. Eleanor, I need to apologize. I should have listened to you years ago. I should have asked for your version. I was a coward. It was a sincere apology. I could feel it. But it arrived 7 years too late. Susan, I told her calmly, I appreciate your apology, but you have to understand something. I'm not angry with you. Not anymore. Anger requires energy, and I used all my energy to survive, to rebuild myself, to become someone who didn't need this family. There was silence on the other end. So, is there no chance of fixing things? She asked. I sighed. Maybe someday, but not now. Now I need to move forward without constantly looking back. The local newspapers eventually covered the story. Local couple faces charges for charity fraud, and tax evasion. I read the article in my office one morning. It mentioned the $53,000 diverted, the offshore accounts, the federal investigation. It didn't mention my name, thank God. I had specifically asked the agents to keep my involvement to a minimum. I hadn't done this for publicity or recognition. I had done it for justice. And perhaps, though I wouldn't admit it easily, for a little well-deserved revenge. My company continued to grow. I won 2 new contracts in the following weeks, larger urban development projects. One was to build a housing complex for veterans, 60 units with integrated support services. The other was a revitalization project of a historic district, preserving old buildings while modernizing them for residential use. Both contracts together were worth more than $5 million. My team grew to 30 employees. I needed bigger offices. One afternoon, a month after the dinner, my lawyer called me. "Eleanor, I need to inform you of something. Liam has tried to contact me. He wants to negotiate an agreement regarding the money they borrowed from you years ago. I asked him how much he was offering to pay back, the full $40,000, plus interest. He calculates it would be around $52,000. I laughed, not with joy but with irony. Tell him I'm not interested in his money, but if he wants to do something useful, he should donate that amount to a real charity fund for children with cancer. A legitimate one this time." My lawyer paused. "Are you sure?" "It's a considerable amount." I was completely sure. The money had stopped mattering. What mattered was the principle. I didn't want anything from them. Not even the return of what they had stolen from me. I wanted them to understand that I was beyond their reach, that they had nothing I needed or wanted. "Inform him of my answer," I told my lawyer, "and make it clear that there will be no more communication. His legal problems are his. I have moved on." Liam and Harper's legal hearings began in February. I didn't attend any, although I was offered the opportunity to testify as a character witness. I declined. I had already said everything I needed to say that night at their house. The reports indicated that the case was solid. They had left a paper trail impossible to ignore. Falsified invoices, bank transfers they couldn't explain, testimonies from people they had deceived. The prosecutor estimated they faced between 3 and 7 years in federal prison if found guilty. Harper tried to call me directly once. She left a voicemail that I listened to in my office, with the door closed. Her voice was completely different from the last time I had heard it. No venom, no arrogance, just pure desperation. "Eleanor, please. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I'm begging. Help us. Say something good about us to the prosecutor. Please. Liam is your son, your only son. You can't let him go to prison." The recording ended with sobs. I sat with that message for an hour, just looking at my phone. It was true. Liam was my son. The only direct family I had in this world. I had carried him in my arms when he was a baby. I had raised him alone after his father abandoned us. I had worked double shifts to give him education and opportunities. That boy had been my entire world, but that boy no longer existed. The man who had closed the door in my face, who had smiled while his wife destroyed me, that was not my son. He was a stranger who shared my last name and nothing more. I didn't return the call. I deleted the message. And I went on with my day as if nothing had happened. Because that was exactly what Liam and Harper had done to me. They had erased me, deleted me from their lives as if I had never existed. Now it was their turn to experience that feeling, and to discover, as I had discovered, that indifference hurts much more than hate. The verdict arrived in April. Guilty on all charges: charity fraud, tax evasion, wire fraud. Liam was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Harper received 4 years. Both were fined more than $300,000 they didn't have. Their house would be foreclosed to pay part of the fines and restitute the stolen funds. Their bank accounts frozen, their careers destroyed, their reputations completely ruined. I read the news in the paper while drinking coffee in my new office. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not sadness, just a sense of a chapter closed. I had expected to feel triumph, maybe even dark joy. But the only thing I felt was exhaustion, tiredness from carrying this story, this weight. It was time to let it go completely. That night, I drove to the neighborhood where I used to park my car when I was homeless. I found the exact street, the streetlight under which I had read my real estate books with a small flashlight. I sat in my new car, in that same spot, and looked around. The neighborhood had changed a little, new businesses, some renovated houses, but the feeling was the same. I remembered the freezing nights, the constant fear, the humiliation of washing in public bathrooms. I remembered the woman I had been, broken but not beaten. We did it, I whispered aloud, speaking to that past version of myself. We did it. The tears came then, not from sadness but from liberation. I cried for the woman who had suffered so much, who had lost everything and rebuilt herself from scratch. I cried for the years lost with my son, for the family I would never have, for the innocence that pain had taken from me. But I also cried with gratitude, because that suffering had turned me into who I was now. Strong, independent, unstoppable. My phone rang. It was Gregory, my former boss, who had given me my first real chance. Eleanor, I just received news. The Urban Development Committee wants to meet with you. They are considering your company for a massive project, a mixed-use complex downtown, estimated value of $15 million. It's the biggest project of the decade. My heart raced. 15 million. It was bigger than everything I had done so far combined. When do they want to meet? I asked him. Next week. Prepare your best proposal. Eleanor, this could change everything for you. I drove home that night with a sense of renewed purpose. I hadn't finished building. I wasn't even close to finished. I had spent years rebuilding myself, and now I was going to spend the next years building bigger, better, more meaningful things. Projects that would help people like me, who had hit rock bottom and needed a chance. Affordable housing, community spaces, places where people could rebuild their lives just as I had rebuilt mine. Liam and Harper would begin their prison sentences in 2 weeks. I had received an official letter informing me, as Liam's closest relative. The letter asked if I would be willing to be an emergency contact during his incarceration. I put the letter in my shredder and turned it on. I heard the mechanical sound as the words turned into thin strips of useless paper. It was my final answer. There would be no more connection, no more ties, no more family. That night, before sleeping, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. 70 years old turned last month. My face showed every year lived, every tear shed, every battle fought. But it also showed strength, dignity, wisdom earned with pain. I liked the woman I saw in that mirror. I liked her much more than the woman I had been years ago, when my entire identity depended on being a good mother, a good relative, a constant giver. Now I was simply Eleanor, and that was more than enough. 6 months after the sentencing, I received a letter. The return address was the federal prison where Liam was serving his time. I held it in my hands for several minutes without opening it. Part of me wanted to throw it directly into the trash, as I had done with all previous communications. But another part, a small part that still remembered the boy he once was, needed to know what it said. I opened it. The handwriting was Liam's, shaky and uneven. "Mom," it began, and that single word hurt me more than I expected. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I'm sorry, not just for closing that door, but for all the years before that, for choosing Harper over you, for allowing her to treat you like that, for being so blind, so greedy, so stupid. You were right about everything. About her, about me, about what we would become. I wish I had listened." I continued reading. He talked about prison, about having time to think, about finally understanding the damage he had caused. He mentioned that Harper and he had divorced, that she blamed him for everything, that she hadn't accepted any responsibility for her actions. He said he had started working in the prison library, helping other inmates prepare legal documents. That maybe, when he got out in 4 years, if he had good behavior, he could find a way to make up for even a fraction of the harm caused. The letter ended with a simple question. "Could you visit me sometime? Just once, just so I can tell you in person how sorry I am." He didn't sign with your son or love, just Liam, as if he knew he no longer had the right to claim that relationship. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer in my desk. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't answer it either. I wasn't ready yet. Maybe someday. Maybe never. I didn't know, and for the first time in my life, I allowed myself not to know. I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to make definitive decisions about forgiveness or revenge. I could simply exist in the space in between, living my life without the actions of others dictating my peace. My company won the $15 million contract. The project took 2 years to complete, but it became my masterpiece. A mixed-use complex with affordable housing on the lower floors, commercial spaces on the street level, and offices on the upper floors. It included green areas, a community daycare, and a job training center. When it opened, the mayor asked me to give a speech. I stood in front of hundreds of people and spoke about second chances, about rebuilding, about never giving up regardless of age or circumstances. I didn't mention my personal story. I didn't need to. The people who knew me knew. And those who didn't, well, they saw the result of that story in every building I built, in every family I helped to house. Imani was in the audience that day, crying with pride. Gregory, too, clapping louder than anyone. Those were the people who mattered, the ones who had seen me at my worst and had chosen to help instead of judge. A year after the opening, I was checking emails in my office when my assistant informed me that I had a visitor without an appointment. She says she's a relative of yours. Susan. I told her to send her in. My cousin entered timidly, looking older than I remembered. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, she spoke. I came to tell you that Liam was released last week. Good behavior. He served 3.5 years. I nodded. I already knew. The prison had notified me automatically. And? I asked. Susan wrung her hands. He's living in a shelter. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have money. The family is trying to help him, but it's hard. He has a record now. No one hires him. I waited. I knew there was more. He asked about you. He wants to see you. Just to apologize in person. I leaned back in my chair and looked at Susan directly. And what do you think? Do you think I should see him? She sighed. Honestly, I don't know, Eleanor, but I do know he is destroyed. Completely broken. And if anyone understands how it feels to be at absolute rock bottom, it's you. She was right about that. No one understood better than I what it was to lose everything and see no way out. 2 weeks later, I drove to the shelter where Liam was living. It was a place I knew well. I had donated money to renovate its facilities the previous year. Ironic that my son ended up in a place I had helped improve. I found him in the community dining room, serving food to other residents. He looked gaunt, with more gray hair, the arrogance completely gone from his posture. When he saw me, he almost dropped the ladle he was holding. We sat at an empty table in the corner. He didn't know how to start. Neither did I. Finally, he said, "Thank you for coming." I nodded. "I read your letter." Silence. Then, "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every horrible thing I did, every cruel word I said, every time I failed you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to hear it directly from me." I looked him in the eyes, those eyes that were once those of a boy I adored. "Liam, do you know what the hardest part of all this was? It wasn't the poverty. It wasn't sleeping in my car or eating from the garbage. It was knowing that my own son, the baby I carried, that I raised, that I loved more than my life, considered me so unimportant that he could discard me without thinking twice." My voice broke slightly. That almost destroyed me, almost. He started to cry, silent tears falling down his face without shame. I know, and I have to live with that every day. In prison, I had a lot of time to think, to really understand what I did to you. And I get it, Mom. If you never want to see me again, I understand completely. I stayed quiet for a long moment. Then I stood up. I don't promise you forgiveness, Liam. Not yet. But I don't promise you eternal hate either. What I promise you is that I am going to keep living my life, building my legacy, being who I am now. And if someday, maybe years from now, I find space in my heart to rebuild something between us, I will let you know. In the meantime, work on yourself, rebuild your life, prove that you learned something from all this. I walked out of that shelter, feeling something strange. It wasn't closure exactly, but rather openness. The possibility, for the first time in years, that maybe forgiveness was possible eventually. Not now, not soon, but someday. And that was enough. When you called me homeless that night, Harper, you forgot that the roofs I build now house hundreds of families. You forgot that the woman sleeping in her car got up, dusted herself off, and built an empire. The only homeless ones here, the only ones without a real foundation, were always you two. You built your life on lies, manipulation, and stolen money. And when everything collapsed, you had nothing real to hold on to. I was 71 years old now. My company was one of the most respected in urban development. I had built homes for more than 500 families. I had employees who depended on me, projects that would change entire communities. I had found purpose, dignity, and peace. And I had done it completely alone, from the lowest point imaginable. That was my true revenge. Not their fall, but my rise. Not their destruction, but my construction. Sometimes I still drove down that street where I used to sleep in my car. Not out of nostalgia, but to remind myself where I came from. To never forget that success isn't measured only in money or recognition, but in the capacity to get up again and again, no matter how many times you get knocked down. That 61-year-old woman, shivering in her old car, never gave up. And thanks to her silent strength and her unwavering determination, I could now live this life that once seemed impossible. This is my story. Of falling, of rebuilding, of silent justice. And if there is one thing I want someone to learn from it, it is this. Never let anyone define you. Never allow pain to destroy you completely. And never, ever, underestimate the power of a woman who has lost everything and decided she has nothing left to lose except her dignity. Because that woman is unstoppable.